Welcome to today's webinar brought to you by Teleport. I'm Stephen Faig, Director of Database Trends and Applications and Unisphere Research. I will be your host for today's broadcast. Our presentation today is titled Securing Access to Fleets of Postgres and MySQL with Open Source Teleport. Before we begin, I want to explain how you can be a part of this broadcast. There will be a question and answer session. If you have a question during the presentation, just type it into the question box provided and click on the submit button. We'll try to get to as many questions as possible, but if your question has not been selected during the show, you will receive an email response. Plus, all viewers today will be entered to win a $100 Amazon gift card just for participating. Now, to introduce our speaker for today, we have Stephen Martin, Solutions Engineering Manager at Teleport. Now I'm going to pass the event over to Stephen.
So we'll be first going over the Teleport access plane so you can understand, how Teleport provides access to protocols for your organization. We'll then be focusing on how does it provide access and auditing for database resources for MySQL and Postgres. Then we'll go into a demonstration of that DB access and sort of a real-world scenario of someone who wants to get into initially their dev environment and then requesting access into a production system so they can update a similar schema, the typical rolling out changes or fixing an issue. And then as Stephen mentioned, we will have a Q&A time to cover any of your questions you might have about Teleport. All right. So first let's talk about how Teleport works. And you often have a set of developers or site reliability engineers that need access to particular resources. And those resources could be on a private network, a cloud provider like AWS, IBM, or Azure. And there's a number of different protocols that you want to connect through. But of course, you don't want to have a heavyweight solution or have different passwords or access keys. Or you might have that now, and you're looking to change that to make that a simpler, more secure solution. So the Teleport access plane is an identity-aware multi-protocol access proxy, which supports currently SSH, applications, Kubernetes, and database. And a key part of its architecture is to utilize short-lived certificates for authentication. And you'll see as I go through the demonstration, I'll be authenticating the user using a single sign-on, and that will issue the user a short-lived certificate. And versus things like access keys or passwords, we feel that's the safest method and one of the best methods in order to authenticate a user and then not allow them to have permanent access at a later date. Now, in terms of how they interact, the user can interact with Teleport via desktop as well as the console. Teleport is a Go-based solution. It is deployed it can be deployed in your own environment, in Kubernetes, really any Linux machine. We have customers running ECS, all kinds of combinations. It's also can be in a highly available configuration or even run off a Raspberry Pi. So it's a very versatile system there. We also offer a Teleport Pro that allows you to host Teleport and then also gain access to your resources there. Now, in terms of when a user wants to authenticate, as I mentioned, often you would use a single sign-on. You can use a local set of users. We support that with multi-factor authentication. Now, with things like a single sign-on, like an identity provider, like Azure Active Directory, Okta, essentially you'll be authenticating with that particular IDP. I'll be using Auth0 in my example, and then Teleport will confirm that authentication, and using the traits that come back, what are preferred usernames, what Kubernetes, what databases you should have access, it can populate that user's role and then issue a certificate that maps to that user's access. Then once that user has that access, then they're able to list resources and then specifically access those resources which Teleport will audit. Now, in terms of how they access, as you see in the middle, there's the proxy and auth. The teleport auth is what has state. It maintains a certificate authority, which allows it to issue certificates for users and hosts. It also is tracking the audit log. What activity is happening? What user is logging in? What requests are they entering? What sessions have started or ended? What was the content of those sessions? So it's tracking that and has state. The proxy is responsible for allowing users and resources to communicate as needed. So there's a number of ports it provides, such as the web console, Kubernetes, and others, that allows you to interact with it both from the desktop as well as the web console. But it has no state. So the proxy essentially, again, is just really a pass-through. It confirms connectivity with the auth server, which allows you to maintain those set of roles. It is a role-based access control system that enforces whether or not someone can access. And you can make it a very open system. People have roots, people have access to all databases, or very restricted, where, as you'll see in my example, I'm restricting user initially to dev environments, and then later they can request to get into prod only if approved. Now, moving forward to focus on the database side of it, again, we see that teleport proxy and teleport auth. So users will interact after they've already been issued their certificate. They will issue themselves a database certificate, and that will allow them per database to identify themselves as authorized to connect with that. The user, in the case of like a P-SQL or MySQL, will access. They could be doing a select star, they could be doing update, but the proxy will be sitting in the middle and intercepting those requests and communicating through a teleport database service running on an agent somewhere. Again, it could be Kubernetes, can be a machine, really anywhere, as long as it can connect to the database, it can run, and that will be used in order to facilitate the connection. Now, for each request they do, that user's access is confirmed. So if in the meantime, even after they log in, their role changes, they no longer have access to a database name or things. If they attempt to create a session or interact, they can be denied. So that allows you to have that type of real-time control and teleport, either easily onboarding or offboarding individuals to have access to databases. Okay. Now the database service you see there, again, that's an agent that runs. It's the same teleport binary that's running for the teleport auth and proxy. For both whether it's our enterprise or OSS, the agents can all be the community version. Very simple to set up, simple configuration, a few lines of YAML, determine what database you're pointing at. You can use IAM specifications as you connecting to things like Aurora, or we also support self-hosted, which simply uses certificate authentication, which allows that's basically allowing the teleport auth service to connect through, and then allowing it to connect the user as another user that's authorized. Okay. Now, stepping more, what we've covered so far is the architecture of how you just do the basic connections, how you're logging, how you're connecting. There's also the concept as part of this conversation as well. If I have a large number of databases and they're spread across a large number of networks, what are my options? And some of our clients, can have hundreds of thousands of databases. And, often it's not feasible, just like the idea that we have multi-cloud regions, you could have multiple teleport deployments that allow you to connect. So again, we have the proxy and the auth where the user connects into. But if you look in the upper right, we have the teleport leaf cluster. So that's an example of, let's say I'm running the teleport server in the Virginia area, and that's connecting to various databases, whether using a Kubernetes agent or say an EC2 agent. Well, I might have another set of databases that are in a very different region, up in New York or somewhere else in the world, and also could be network restricted. I don't want to have hundreds of databases all connecting back, the agents connecting back to a specific teleport instance in a different VPC. Basically, I want to contain them and only have one particular teleport instance in an isolated network. So using that leaf cluster, using our reverse tunnel connection, I can deploy a teleport instance, have multiple resources connect into that, and then easily connect back to another teleport instance and give access. So that's one way that we can, provide connectivity without having to expose a lot of ingress. Most of our connectivity is egress, where the agents themselves will dial home, let's say, back to teleport, register themselves, and provide that connectivity of the database being available. And then if they do need to shut down, they just simply shut down, and the database will automatically expire. So it's really good about supporting ephemeral environments where you're bringing things up, bringing things down. All of the databases you see there can all be labeled individually. So our role-based access control primarily uses labels to determine, what resources you have access to. You can, of course, use regular expressions or that will allow you to map to, let's say, all of the dev star or all of the staging star of a particular customer. So in the case of hundreds or thousands of databases, you can come up with a very simple pattern that allows you to easily allow or restrict access to particular databases. Now, in terms of how that role-based control works, it has a allow and deny concept. The deny takes precedence. So if I have a database or if I say, well, all of the dev customer X are denied combinations, and then I also add another role where a person gets, it is saying you're allowed to do that, the deny will take precedence. So that's a key part of our role-based access control is to have deny take precedence. You also can control the length of a session, so how long can a person be in a session without re-authenticating. And you can control things like port forwarding or other settings related to our other protocols. Now, in terms of the demonstration we're going over today, again, we want to just introduce you to the teleport capabilities, how you interact with the various databases, see auditing, and get to understand, some of the concepts I've been talking about, like a root cluster, a leaf cluster, what those capabilities can do for you. Now, next we'll go into, what's in that auditing, what do you see when a user interacts, with a particular database, and how is that made available in the audit log. Now, in terms of the actual scenario I'm going to run, you'll see two different types of access. You'll see a user that has a broader access, and then you'll see another user that's more restricted, where they have a specific development database, and also they can request access to a production database. The administrative user, they can approve that particular access and also monitor, what that user is doing. All of the various auditing things we can do can be streamed to things like Elk or Splunk very easily. We also have a lot of customers are using services like Datadog. So if they wanted to monitor for, let's say, particular queries or unusual activity, like lots of sessions all occurring from one user, you could certainly watch for that. Now, well, as part of this concept is the idea of being able to look at, what's in our data, what's happening. Am I seeing if I want to, and often you want to progress your fix rather than just doing a fix directly on let's say production or your pre-production. So you can see an example of a user interacting from a development point of view, and then requesting and getting access into production, so they can actually see the change that's occurred. And that's using our access request functionality. So access requests allow a particular users from their initial set of roles to say, well, I want to request, let's say, production access or staging access. And whatever role they're asking for may have a particular label that allows them in. They still have the restrictions from their initial role, things like I mentioned about the deny, but they can use these new allows to allow them access to labels they may not have had access to before. It may allow them to have access to different users. You might have a maintain user or user that has specific DBA rights that are not usually given to users. And then those are given for that specific set of time allowed for the role. All right, so why don't we step into the demonstration part and we can see teleport in action.
Looking good, Stephen.
Thank you. So you can see here, I've gone ahead and logged into one of our web consoles, and you can see I have a set of database. On my left, I have all of the resources I have access to. You can see I have up to 200 different databases here. I have some MySQL. We can also see that we have some Postgres that are available. In addition to just listing the databases, I have my set of labels. And these labels allow you to distinguish the type of environment it's in. Is it production, dev, staging? And again, these labels are used in terms of the roles. Now, from my desktop, I've wanted to connect to it. It gives me information about how to connect. I should be logged in. I should log into that specific database. And then I can use things like the direct MySQL. You'll also see how you can do that from a GUI client, which is pretty popular when it comes to databases. So why don't we take a quick look at that, and then we'll be coming back into the console. So here I already have it primed to log in. I'm using my auth0 as my single sign-on. And that will automatically open up a browser window. This is connected with my Google account. And then this will log in successful. And as I mentioned before, it'll issue that short-term certificate. I can see I have 12 hours on that certificate. That's the default time. It can be made higher, let's say 30 hours. Also, the user themselves can reduce that. Let's say if they're in a system where they're not going to be using it for a large amount of time. There's some other settings we can see here. We can see what roles he's set to. In this case, just a simple dev access they're using, and I'll go over what that entails. Now from here, I can again list databases. You notice this user just has one database listed, and that's due to their role, because their role has a more restricted access than the administrative user I was on. If I want to log in, simply do that. It'll give me information about how I can connect into the system. Now, like most people, I like the GUI approach. So I'm going to use my MySQL Workbench, connect to the database. You can see here I have this Stephen Dev user, and I'll show you in a second some more information about how that. I've set in my SSL settings. Oops. Let me connect in here. So now I'm in the system. I can do a select star from departments. Okay. See that? We'll be coming back. Something's a little off here. We'll be coming back to this. And I think in this case, I just need to do a minor. Oh, that's fine. Okay. Oh, never mind. But I can see here that something looks off in terms of this data, but we'll come back about how we want to fix that. And we can see here in terms of what's been happening. I can see that a session has started. This particular user has connected to the database, employees, what users have done. This information is in a JSON format. This is the particular database it's actually connecting to. So this is an Aurora RDS database running MySQL. Now in terms of the query that are being run, this was the actual one I ran. So I can see the query, what it's connected to, what DB user was used, and the time. Now, in order to get access to that, we had our role configured. We can see here this is the dev access user. So within this user, we've set particular settings. We're allowing them to connect, really to any database user they want. We are restricting about what databases though. So they can only match to environment of dev with a machine of Mark III. I'm just using that Mark idea. And then in terms of what else they can ask for, they can ask for prod access or prod mod access. So the user, when they're initially authenticated, they're not given these roles, but they are allowed to request them. They can request them both from the web or from the command line. We'll be using the command line today. Now, in terms of the user I'm using, admin, that user has a review setting. So that user is allowed to see any role coming in. In this case, I'm using star. I could have restricted that further, saying, well, I only want you doing prod or a specific prod role. So you're able to really further restrict how they're able to get in if you like. So as I mentioned, this user currently has dev access. They did see an issue with a particular set. They want to confirm, okay, am I seeing that issue in prod as well? Let's go check. So now we've asked for this particular role in mod access. And then because my user has those admin rights, I'm able to review that request. We can see earlier it had been approved, that had already expired, that usage, and now we're going to review this one. And from here we can approve or deny. See approve. Please go check. And just so you can see it, there is an approve option here. Submit that approve. And now it's available. So now this user has both the dev access and the prod mod access. If we take a look back at the audit log, we can see when that request was created, and then that request was reviewed, who approved it. We can see all of those details. And again, all of this can be fed into an elk or stack of the nature. Now in this case, the user can then list the database. They can connect through. In this case, we're going to connect into the prod and see if we see the same issue. Yep. So we're seeing that same item. Now in this case, I'm navigating in databases connecting to this particular cluster. You'll notice up here there's another drop down for clusters. So I can actually navigate to that other cluster as well. So this is a separate teleport instance that's running. It has its own auth service. It has its own proxy and then the resource it's connecting. But my roles can map to that, and then I can see these various databases are available. I can look at the audit log that was occurring on that machine. You'll see that it has remote. So earlier I connected through and done some interaction here. And again, part of the power of this is that you don't have, this cluster can be in a completely different region, doesn't have to have any ingress made available to users, but you can connect easily through and provide access. Okay. Now in terms of, if I want to update this, and let's try that SQL workbench again, see if I a little better luck here. I have my maintain users. And one thing I was doing, and I didn't get to explain that too well, we have our DB list, which tells us, which databases we've connected through. You can see here I'm currently connecting to the prod, and I can always see, okay, what is my config? So I can see that I'm connecting through onto this particular host. That's my proxy connection. This is the port it's sitting on, and then these are the certificates that are going to be used when it makes those connection. And in terms of a client like Workbench, those are used. I'm going to say this user. I'm using this same host name and the port. What schema, in this case, employees I want to connect to, and then I give the various keys, just like it mentions there. Okay, so better luck next time. I think I mistyped a particular file path there before, so sorry about that. But then the user can query, look at the particular departments, and this is just an employee sample database that's made available for a lot of MySQL. I can go in, and the convenient thing about the GUI, I can directly apply it. I can make the change. We can see what query is going to occur and apply that change and close. So now let's go back to, in terms of our audit log, and see what we saw there. And you can see we did execute this query. And it did modify the data. We'll also see any other activity that's happening from, as we're in the interaction, and also when the user closes a particular session. Then that will also update here. And we see that session is ended. So that's being tracked as well, not just the queries that are occurring. And again, you can keep track of that, and make sure if people are doing an unusual number of sessions or accessing tables that you would expect to be sensitive in nature at all. And just to go back over in terms of the roles, so the major difference in terms of when I got access to that particular role, this role has the labeling environment prod and Mark III. So they're only going to be able to access databases that have that particular labeling. I also could have put Mark like a star to say that, well, this person can access any of them that match that particular expression. You can also, from your external SSO, you could have put in a particular mapping of, let's say, external dot machines. So that way it could automatically populate a set of machine names into here. And that's something that often is popular if you have a certain set of groups. We also support regular expression functions. So if you want to do even further substitution of looking for something, like the group names I get back don't exactly map up, then you have a lot of flexibility there in terms of modifying, what comes back and how you map into it. Now, currently we support the Postgres, MySQL. We also support Redshift on Amazon. We're looking at a number of other databases that we want to support in a similar way in terms of access and auditing. And in terms of how you deploy this, you'll notice that you can't really tell, well, how is this connected? Is this on a kube agent? Is this you're running it from a Helm chart? Is this on a EC2 machine? And really to the user, that's not visible. But it's very, so in that way the experience is very seamless. They don't need to know that. They simply just need to see the database, see what they can list and connect to. In terms of adding more database, it's very simple. you would just add a new token. You can see here we have various help in terms of, if I want to add in other types of databases, it gives me information. Okay, you'd add a new token, and we use the concept of tokens to allow you to initially authenticate the node that it has access as a database type of service. After that, it forms a certificate relationship, just like when the user logs in, they receive that short-term certificate. We also use certificates for our node agents, and that allows them to maintain a relationship going forward. The token then is not required unless you add a new protocol. So it's in that case, it's a very simple architecture to add in new items, but also very, very secure. From here, you would simply just have the teleport service that can run, what database it's connecting to, what's the URI, and then in case if you're doing like the RDS, what's the region. If I was doing a self-hosted, it's simply the URI because I would deploy out the signed certs from teleport into that service, and then that would allow it to connect and act as other users. Well, Stephen, that was most of what I wanted to show today. I'd be interested if we had any questions.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Stephen. So we can go into questions from our viewers now. First question, does Teleport work with PHP Storm?
It does. There's a number of database clients that we support, and we keep trying to add more information about that. If you go to our goteleport.com/docs, in our database access, we have information on database clients, how to connect them. Often, as you saw, you can use that tshDB config to see the list of the SSL files, and provided that they do support certificate authentication, that those type of applications should work, and we do have clients that have tested and confirmed that PHP Storm works.
Understood. Next question, if a user's role should not allow access anymore to database names, are changes immediate?
They are immediate for next sessions. If you change, as you saw, I had a star for which database names connect. If I wanted to restrict that to employees or another schema, and you change that, then yes, the next time the person tries to connect, they'll be denied if they try to do something they're not allowed anymore. So that effect is immediate. There are other ways that you can, stop a person's access. So there's a lot of good safeguards in there to prevent people who should no longer have access, and you need to quickly offboard them from that access.
Got it. Our next question is Teleport suitable for a Windows-only environment?
We support from a client perspective. If you're going to be using database clients from Windows, that we do offer a TSH client that can work in Windows, and that allows you to access in there. The hosting of Teleport is on Linux machines or through our self-hosted cloud. We are looking at expanding some of our Windows support, but currently, in terms of hosting, it is Linux.
Got it. Okay, next question. How do I connect to MySQL Postgres to Oracle?
Okay, currently we support MySQL. We do not support the Oracle database. We are looking at it. That's likely to be one we could add in the future. Essentially, as we progressed, we initially released MySQL and Postgres support for RDS and then self-hosted. And then within a couple months, we added Redshift. We're adding MongoDB going into our version 7.0, which is being released next month. So we're progressively adding new databases, and we expect to really expand that list going forward to a large list of the most popular databases. So Oracle is definitely one we could do. I'd suggest, you can always watch our preview releases, which is part of our docs, to see if that's something that's coming up. And we do tend to put out a lot of our RFDs or other announcements that will allow you to see, well, what's coming out for Teleport and when will this be supported?
Thanks for clarifying. Next question, are there any limitations on target MySQL versions?
There are some specific, as long as it can do the certificate-based authentication, then you'll be fine. There are some specifics on the MySQL version higher than in the high 8.0 version. So you could run into some issues with that. If there are, you're always happy to reach out to us on our Slack channel at /teleport, and we can always see about ways for you to get that. But in general, there's not very many restrictions. It's simply that there was a change from, I think it's 8.03 or a very specific minor version of MySQL modified the way it recognizes the MySQL version, and that's something that we have seen as an issue in some cases.
Understood. Another question, can it integrate with AD and SSO for passwordless authorization?
What was the ADSO? What was the other part there?
AD and SSO for passwordless auth.
Oh, Active Directory. Yes, no, definitely. That is supported. We do have documentation on using Active Directory or ADFS for single sign-on. That's a very popular option in terms of doing that. And as I said, we have detailed examples of how to use that.
Gotcha. Our next question is, the user interface available via mobile access as well as computer, i.e., is there a mobile app-based access option? Thanks, very interesting presentation.
We have looked at mobile. I'd say presently we don't have a specific mobile version. We don't have a mobile app. The web application is very friendly to mobile. Most of our interaction for database itself is from the desktop client for now. So I'd say that's for this discussion, you wouldn't tend to use that for mobile. But it is something we may look in the future of more types of web and mobile interaction.
Understood. Another question, is Teleport regularly security audited?
It is. We run through a security audit at least yearly. We do follow SOC 2, and that's part of something that is also regularly audited. And if you go to our site and look at our resources, those security audits are available. So you can review, what particular findings were there, and how we addressed any findings were done. I think we are, as Stephen mentioned at the outset, an open source offering, and we think that's the best way to be for security. But we do also release those security findings that we have and how we address them, both for our, the product that people install on-prem or our cloud offering.
Understood. And I see someone asking where they can access a recording of this session. Just a reminder to everyone, this will be available on demand. You can use the same exact URL, and we will send you a notification email. It'll probably be up, I'd say, within 24 hours. So, Stephen, we've gone through the questions. Before we conclude here today, is there anything else you'd like our viewers to know? What's the one thing you'd really like them to keep in mind moving forward from here?
One of our big things is to keep doing frequent releases. We are trying to release major functions at least every quarter. So as mentioned about particular databases or items, those are things that we're regularly releasing, and we think that's the best cadence to be on, so that whether they're OSS users or our licensed users, that people are frequently getting more value for the investment they've done with Teleport. And as I mentioned, that's why it's good to follow us on Twitter. Our teleport account there, go to goteleport.com. And I mentioned the docs. There's a preview release that will give you what information is there. You can always go to our GitHub and see, what is the latest information that's happening. And we're also we encourage you to join our Slack, which you can see that from our goteleport.com site. And interact with us, ask questions. Just like the great questions we had today. How do I do this? What do we do there? And we have a great community of both people at Teleport as well as the community themselves that will answer your questions.
Fantastic. Once again, I'd like to thank our speaker today, Stephen Martin, Solutions Engineer Manager at Teleport. Again, if you would like to review this presentation or send it to a colleague, you can use the same exact URL that you used for today's live event. It will be archived, and you'll receive an email notification within the next couple of days once that archive is posted. And just for participating in today's event, you could win this $100 Amazon gift card. The winner will be announced on June 30th. We will reach out to you via email if you are the lucky viewer. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and we hope to see you again soon.